My name is Jessica Lawson, and I am 32 years old. For 5 years, I poured my heart into my position at Innovate Tech, climbing from entry-level to project manager. The annual company Gala should have been my crowning moment after saving the company millions with Project Falcon. Instead, VP Thomas had been acting strange around me lately, avoiding eye contact and whispering to others. Little did I know that evening would transform from the most humiliating moment of my professional life into an unexpected victory that would reshape my entire career. Before I tell you how my career was almost destroyed but ended up soaring, instead let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever dealt with workplace injustice. The journey to that fateful night began long before I ever stepped foot in that ballroom. After graduating with my business degree from University of Michigan, I spent 3 years at a smaller tech firm learning the ropes. When the opportunity to join Innovate Tech appeared, I jumped at the chance. This was not just any company, but one of the leading innovators in business software solutions, the kind of place where careers were made and industry leaders emerged. My first position was nothing glamorous. As a junior analyst in the operations department, I spent my days generating reports, attending meetings where I barely spoke, and trying to absorb everything I could about how the company functioned. Those early days were filled with late nights, learning proprietary systems, and studying our product lineup until I could recite specifications in my sleep. The first 2 years were a steady climb. I moved from junior analyst to senior analyst, then to assistant coordinator. Each step came with more responsibility, but the real breakthrough happened in my 3rd year, when I was assigned to work directly under Heather Johnson, one of the most respected project directors in the company. Under her mentorship, I flourished, learning not just technical skills, but how to navigate the complex politics of corporate America. "You have something special, Jessica," Heather told me, after I successfully coordinated a challenging client implementation. "You see solutions where others only see roadblocks." By my 4th year, I had been promoted to project manager, with my own team of 6. This is where I met Sarah Williams, who quickly became both my right hand professionally and my closest friend at the company. Sarah was brilliant with data analysis and completely straightforward, a rare combination in our sometimes politically charged environment. "The difference between you and most people climbing the ladder is that you actually deserve each step," Sarah told me once over after work drinks, and people noticed that. Among my team was also Brian Taylor, whose programming expertise had saved our projects multiple times, and Allison Cooper, whose attention to detail made her invaluable for quality assurance. We functioned like a well-oiled machine, developing a reputation for delivering projects on time and under budget. It was in my 5th year that the opportunity of a lifetime landed on my desk: Project Falcon. This was a complete overhaul of our core product suite that would determine the company's competitive edge for years to come. When Heather recommended me to lead it, I was equal parts terrified and thrilled. "This could be career-defining," she told me privately. "The executive team will be watching this one closely." What followed were 6 months of the most intense work I had ever experienced. I postponed my vacation plans regularly, worked 12-hour days, and even missed my sister's birthday celebration. My apartment became little more than a place to shower and occasionally sleep. My team made similar sacrifices, united by the belief that we were creating something exceptional. Project Falcon was designed to streamline our enterprise resource planning software, cutting processing time by 60%, while adding functionality our competitors could not match. The technical challenges were enormous, with several points where it seemed impossible to achieve what we had promised. During one particularly difficult week, when we discovered a fundamental compatibility issue that threatened the entire project, I brought sleeping bags to the office. Brian, Sarah, and I worked 48 hours straight, subsisting on vending machine snacks and coffee, until we found a solution that not only fixed the problem but improved the overall system architecture. When we finally launched Falcon, 3 weeks ahead of schedule and 11% under budget, the response was beyond anything we could have hoped for. Client feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Several major accounts that had been considering switching to competitors renewed their contracts. The sales team reported the easiest quarter of new client acquisition they had ever experienced. Word began circulating that Project Falcon had saved the company an estimated $17 million in retained business and new contracts. More importantly, it positioned Innovate Tech as the industry leader just as our largest competitor was stumbling with their own product rollout. Recognition came quickly from most quarters. The development team sent us an enormous gift basket: Heather took our entire team out for a celebration dinner. The marketing department featured us in the company newsletter. Even the notoriously reserved CFO stopped me in the elevator to express his appreciation for what our work meant to the bottom line. However, there was one notable exception to this wave of appreciation: Thomas Murphy, the Executive Vice President of Product Development. Despite Falcon falling directly under his division, Thomas had been strangely hands-off throughout the project, appearing only at major milestone presentations and occasionally sending terse emails asking for status updates. "He is taking a special interest in your project," Heather had warned me early on. Thomas has a reputation for either claiming credit for successful initiatives or distancing himself completely from anything that struggles. In the weeks leading up to the annual company, Gala rumors began circulating that significant announcements would be made that night, including promotions and special recognitions. Several colleagues hinted that my name was being mentioned in leadership meetings, and Sarah overheard the HR director discussing a special acknowledgement for the Falcon team. I allowed myself to hope. After 5 years of dedication and the exhausting sprint to complete Falcon, perhaps this would be my moment. Director-level positions rarely opened up, but with the company's growth it seemed possible that new opportunities might be announced at the gala. The event was held at the Grand Wellington Hotel, the most prestigious venue in the city. I spent weeks selecting a perfectly professional yet elegant black dress, practicing potential remarks in my bathroom mirror, and even getting professional hair and makeup for the occasion. The night of the gala, I arrived, feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves. The hotel ballroom had been transformed with crystal chandeliers, elegant table settings, and subtle company branding. Executive team members mingled with department heads, while servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvre. This was the most important networking event of the year, and I was determined to make the most of it. As I handed my coat to the attendant and smoothed my dress, I caught my reflection in a mirror. The woman looking back at me stood tall, confident, ready for recognition that felt well-earned and long overdue. Little did I know that within hours that confidence would be shattered in the most public and humiliating way possible, only to be restored in a manner I could never have anticipated. The Grand Wellington Ballroom was truly spectacular that evening. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with white orchids and silver place settings. A string quartet played softly in the corner, and the gentle hum of conversation filled the air as nearly 300 Innovate Tech employees in their finest attire gathered for the annual celebration. I spotted Sarah near the bar and made my way over, accepting congratulations from several colleagues along the way. She handed me a glass of champagne, looking stunning in a deep blue gown. "You deserve every good thing that comes your way tonight," she said, clinking her glass against mine. The executive floor has been buzzing about Falcon all week. As we chatted, I noticed Thomas Murphy across the room. Tall and imposing in an expensive tailored suit, he was engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with 2 board members. When he glanced in my direction, his expression darkened momentarily before he turned away. "Is it my imagination, or is Thomas avoiding me?" I asked Sarah. She hesitated. "I did not want to say anything to worry you before the gala, but he has been making some strange comments in management meetings. Yesterday he referred to Falcon as his division's achievement despite some execution challenges." A small knot of unease formed in my stomach. Execution challenges. We came in under budget and ahead of schedule with client satisfaction ratings through the roof. "Everyone knows that," Sarah assured me. "Nobody takes Thomas's revisionist history seriously." As the evening progressed, I tried to speak with Thomas directly, but he seemed to mysteriously drift to another conversation whenever I approached. More concerning were the sympathetic glances I received from several senior managers and the way conversations seemed to halt when I joined groups. William Harrison, the CEO of Innovate Tech, arrived fashionably late as usual, working the room with practiced charm. With him was Edward Reynolds, the CEO of Meridian Group, our parent company. Reynolds rarely attended our functions, making his presence tonight particularly noteworthy. He was shorter than I expected, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they landed on. During the cocktail hour, I finally managed to approach Thomas at the bar. "Thomas, do you have a moment? I wanted to discuss the Falcon implementation at National Bank. They have requested additional customizations that could turn into a significant upsell opportunity." He barely looked at me as he collected his drink. Not now, Jessica. Perhaps next week. I need to speak with the board members about more pressing strategic matters. Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me standing alone at the bar. The dismissal was so abrupt that the bartender gave me a sympathetic look. As we moved into the dining portion of the evening, I found my assigned seat at a table with my team and several mid-level managers. Notably absent was Heather, who had been placed at a table with other directors near the front of the room. When I caught her eye, she smiled but quickly looked away, uncharacteristically avoiding eye contact. The printed program for the evening listed various recognitions and announcements. I scanned it quickly, looking for any mention of Project Falcon. There was a section titled Department Achievements where such announcements would typically be listed. But to my surprise, Falcon was mentioned only in passing as part of Product Development Division successes, with no specific team members named. "This is weird," Brian whispered, pointing to the program. "Falcon was the biggest success story of the year. Why is it barely mentioned?" Dinner was served, a forgettable 3-course meal that I barely tasted as my anxiety grew. Across the table, Allison was engrossed in conversation with a marketing manager, and I overheard fragments that made my blood run cold. Completely restructured. Original approach was flawed. Saved by executive intervention. The marketing manager was saying, "Who told you that?" Allison asked, frowning. "Thomas gave the executive briefing yesterday. Said the project required significant course correction from above to succeed." I nearly choked on my water. This was an outright lie. Thomas had been minimally involved, attending only 3 of the 26 status meetings and contributing nothing to the solutions we developed when challenges arose. Sarah, who had also overheard, placed a warning hand on my arm. "Not here," she murmured. "We can address this tomorrow, with documentation." After dinner, William Harrison took the stage for his annual address, praising the company's performance and outlining ambitions for the coming year. He then began announcing promotions and special recognitions. I sat up straighter despite my growing unease. Several well-deserved promotions were announced to enthusiastic applause. Then Harrison moved on to department achievements. He highlighted marketing's successful rebrand, finance's system integration, and several other projects, offering specific praise to the team leaders involved. When he reached product development, he invited Thomas to join him on stage. My heart raced as Thomas took the microphone. "This year, our division successfully deployed Project Falcon, a significant upgrade to our core offering," Thomas said, his voice booming through the speakers. "While there were some initial directional challenges, my team was able to implement the necessary corrections to ensure a successful outcome." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Members of my team exchanged incredulous glances. This was a blatant misrepresentation of reality, and Thomas was delivering it with complete confidence. To discuss some of the technical aspects of this deployment, Thomas continued, "I would like to invite Jessica Lawson to the stage." A spotlight swung toward my table and scattered applause broke out. I sat frozen for a moment, completely blindsided. This had not been on the program. Sarah nudged me gently, and I rose on unsteady legs, making my way to the stage. As I approached the steps, Thomas leaned down and whispered, "Keep it brief and stick to the technical details. No need to mention team contributions." Confusion and a growing sense of dread filled me as I took my place at the podium. The spotlight was blinding 300 faces staring back at me. Among them, I spotted Heather looking concerned, Sarah giving me an encouraging nod, and at the front table, Edward Reynolds watching with unnerving intensity. I had prepared remarks in case I was called upon, but the context was all wrong. This was not the recognition I had anticipated, but something else entirely. Still, I was a professional. I adjusted the microphone and began to speak. "Good evening, everyone. Project Falcon represented a complete reimagining of our core product suite, with significant improvements to processing speed and functionality." I had spoken for barely 2 minutes when Thomas stepped forward and placed a hand on the podium, effectively crowding me away from the microphone. The message was clear: my time was up. But what happened next would turn an uncomfortable moment into a professional nightmare that would change the course of my career forever. "Thank you, Jessica," Thomas said smoothly, taking the microphone as if we had rehearsed this transition. His voice carried an artificial warmth that did not reach his eyes. As Jessica mentioned, there were technical components to Project Falcon, but what she has modestly omitted is the strategic overhaul that was necessary midway through development. I stood awkwardly to the side, unsure whether to return to my seat or remain on stage. Thomas continued speaking as if I were no longer present. The initial approach had significant flaws that would have resulted in compatibility issues with our enterprise clients. Once these issues were identified by my executive team, we implemented a course correction that ultimately saved the project. My mouth fell open in shock. This was an outright fabrication. The compatibility solution had come during our 48-hour marathon session with Brian discovering the architectural fix, while Thomas was away at a golf retreat with clients. Additionally, Thomas continued his voice, taking on a regretful tone that sent warning signals through my body. The initial budget projections were wildly optimistic. While we did deliver a functional product, the real cost analysis shows we barely broke, even when accounting for resource allocation and opportunity costs. This lie was even more blatant than the first. Finance had independently verified that Falcon had come in 11% under budget, with projected revenue impacts that would yield a 700% return on investment within 18 months. I glanced toward my table where Sarah was frantically shaking her head, her expression a mixture of disbelief and rage. Brian had his head in his hands. At the executive table, Heather was whispering urgently to the CFO, who looked equally confused. In light of these project management challenges, Thomas said, turning slightly to look at me with cold eyes, and as part of our ongoing organizational optimization, we will be restructuring the product development division effective immediately. The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was on the stage, witnessing my public execution. I felt lightheaded, my heart hammering so hard, I was certain others could hear it. Several redundant positions will be eliminated, and project oversight will be consolidated under direct executive management to ensure proper alignment with strategic objectives. Thomas turned to face me fully now, no longer pretending to address the audience. Jessica, you are done here. Please clear your desk by tomorrow afternoon. Human Resources will contact you regarding exit procedures. The words hit me like a physical blow. My stomach lurched, and for a terrible moment, I thought I might be sick right there on stage. A dismissal was bad enough, but to be fired publicly in front of the entire company, including the parent company CEO, was beyond humiliating. It was career-destroying. I stood frozen, unable to move or speak. My face burned with shame and shock, and I could feel tears threatening to form. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears, and the room seemed to tilt slightly. 5 years of dedication, months of grueling work on Falcon, all my hopes for advancement destroyed in seconds by a man who had contributed nothing to our success. Thomas turned back to the audience, his voice shifting to an upbeat tone as if he had not just shattered someone's career before their eyes. On a more positive note, I am pleased to announce that under my direct leadership, we will be launching Project Condor next quarter, which will build upon the foundation laid by Falcon. I finally found the strength to move, taking a shaky step toward the stairs. My only thought was escape to get away from the spotlight and the hundreds of pitying stares. As I reached the edge of the stage, I caught sight of my team. Sarah looked murderous, Brian shocked, and Allison was wiping tears from her eyes. And then I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. Edward Reynolds, the CEO of our parent company, was watching the scene with an expression of cold calculation, his eyes moving between Thomas and me with unmistakable interest. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The paralyzing shock began to transform into something else, rage, pure clarifying rage at the injustice unfolding before hundreds of witnesses. 5 years of my life devoted to this company. Countless nights and weekends sacrificed. A major project delivered successfully, despite obstacles. And this was my reward: public humiliation and dismissal, based on blatant lies. Thomas was still speaking, outlining his vision for the department he was destroying, taking credit for ideas that had come from my team. Each word fueled my growing anger until it burned away the shock and shame. I thought of walking out, of sending a detailed email to the board tomorrow, of pursuing legal options. But I knew that once I left this stage, the narrative would be set. 300 people would leave this room believing I had failed somehow, that I deserved this public execution. Thomas would control the story. Unless I changed it right now. With clarity I did not know I possessed in such a moment, I walked back to the podium. Thomas faltered mid-sentence as I approached, clearly surprised by my return. He had expected me to slink away in disgrace. "Excuse me," I said. my voice remarkably steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. I believe I still have the floor. Thomas's face darkened. Jessica, I was clear. You are dismissed. Please do not make this more difficult than it needs to be. I reached for the microphone. Thomas gripped it tightly, unwilling to relinquish control. Security, he called, looking toward the back of the room. Please escort Miss Lawson from the premises. I saw 2 security guards begin to move from their positions by the doors, but they hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. The room had erupted in murmurs, the tension palpable. Before you have me removed, I said, loudly enough for the front tables to hear, even without the microphone, perhaps you would like to explain why the official finance report shows Falcon came in 11% under budget, not over, as you just claimed. Thomas's grip on the microphone tightened. You are out of line, Jessica. Or why client satisfaction ratings for Falcon are the highest in company history. I continued, my voice growing stronger. Or perhaps you could show everyone the email thread where you opposed the compatibility solution that saved the project while you were at your golf retreat. Thomas moved closer, his voice low and threatening. You are making a serious mistake. I can ensure you never work in this industry again. His threat, rather than intimidating me, provided the final push I needed. I reached out and firmly grasped the microphone, pulling it from his surprised grip. The audio system squealed with feedback momentarily, before I adjusted the position. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice now amplified through the ballroom. I would like to make a correction to the evening's program. The VP has just informed me I am done here. Apparently he handles HR now. Thomas lunged for the microphone, but I stepped back, continuing to speak. What Mr. Murphy failed to mention is that Project Falcon succeeded despite his active obstruction, not because of his leadership. I have documentation showing he missed 23 of 26 status meetings and rejected the very compatibility solution that saved the project. Thomas's face had turned an alarming shade of red. From the corner of my eye, I could see William Harrison half rising from his seat, his expression unreadable. The security guards remained frozen at the back of the room, awaiting clearer instructions. Furthermore, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. I have emails showing Mr. Murphy attempted to divert resources from Falcon to his pet projects 3 separate times, which would have derailed our timeline completely. Thomas finally found his voice, shouting even without a microphone. This is slander, security. Remove her now. The security guards took a few uncertain steps forward, but before they could reach the stage, someone else stood up. Edward Reynolds, CEO of Meridian Group, our parent company, rose from his seat at the front table. The room instantly fell silent. Reynolds was known throughout the industry as a kingmaker and a ruthless evaluator of talent. His presence at our gala had been notable, but his intervention now was unprecedented. With deliberate steps, he walked toward the stage, passing Thomas without acknowledging him. When he reached the podium, he extended his hand toward me. May I? He asked quietly, indicating the microphone. My heart still racing, I handed it over, preparing myself for whatever came next. The room went absolutely silent as Reynolds adjusted the microphone to his height and surveyed the audience. The moment stretched into eternity as 300 people held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Good evening, Edward Reynolds, said his voice calm and measured in stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. For those who do not know me, I am Edward Reynolds, CEO of Meridian Group. He paused, surveying the room with the confident ease of someone accustomed to commanding attention. The silence was absolute, hundreds of people frozen in place, witnessing what was clearly a pivotal moment in company history. I had not planned to speak tonight, he continued. I came to observe, to take the temperature of one of our most important subsidiaries. What I have observed has been educational. My hands were trembling so badly I had to clasp them together. I stood slightly behind Reynolds, uncertain whether to remain on stage or return to my seat. Thomas hovered nearby, his face, a mask of barely controlled fury, tinged with growing uncertainty. Project Falcon has been of particular interest to me for several months now, Reynolds said. In fact, I have been following its development quite closely. He turned slightly, acknowledging me with a small nod before continuing. What you may not know is that Meridian Group has been conducting a comprehensive evaluation of all major initiatives across our subsidiaries, with particular attention to leadership effectiveness and resource utilization. Thomas shifted his weight, a flicker of concern crossing his face for the first time. William Harrison, still at his table, sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Project Falcon Reynolds continued, presented an interesting case study. A major overhaul with significant technical challenges managed by a relatively young team, lead with limited executive support. He paused, allowing his words to settle across the room. When I review projects, I look beyond the surface metrics. Budget adherence and timeline completion are important, certainly, but I am more interested in leadership dynamics. Who makes the critical decisions? Who solves the inevitable problems? Who takes responsibility when things go wrong? And who claims credit when things go right? Thomas cleared his throat. Edward, perhaps we should discuss this privately rather than disrupting the evening's program further. Reynolds turned to look at Thomas directly, for the first time, his gaze cool and assessing. On the contrary, Thomas, I believe transparency is called for at this moment. He turned back to address the audience. Project Falcon did indeed come in under budget and ahead of schedule, as Miss Lawson stated. What she did not mention is that it has already generated an estimated $27 million in retained business for Innovate Tech, with projections suggesting an additional $40 million in new contracts over the next year. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I caught Sarah's eye from my position on stage. She gave me a subtle thumbs up, her expression still tense but with a glimmer of hope. More interestingly, Reynolds continued, our analysis indicates that this success occurred not because of executive oversight, but despite active obstacles placed in the team's path. Thomas stepped forward. Edward, these are serious allegations being made without context. As I mentioned, there were strategic considerations that required course corrections. Reynolds held up a hand, silencing Thomas effortlessly. I have reviewed the documentation, Thomas. All of it, including the email threads Miss Lawson referenced. The blood drained from Thomas's face so rapidly I thought he might faint. For the past 8 months, Reynolds explained to the room, Meridian has been conducting a quiet investigation into management practices at Innovate Tech, following concerns raised by several departed employees. 3 former team members specifically cited Thomas Murphy's leadership style as their primary reason for leaving, with particular emphasis on a pattern of claiming credit for subordinates' work while deflecting blame for Mason Forey failures. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The room had gone from uncomfortable silence to stunned disbelief. We had nearly concluded our investigation, Reynolds said, with substantial evidence already catalogued. What I witnessed tonight was merely the final confirmation of a problematic pattern. He turned to me, his expression softening slightly. Miss Lawson, I apologize for not intervening sooner. Your courage in speaking up, despite the obvious professional risk, is precisely the kind of leadership Meridian values. Then he addressed Thomas directly. Mr. Murphy, effective immediately, you are suspended pending final review of our investigation findings. Please surrender your company devices to security and leave the premises. Thomas's face contorted with rage and disbelief. This is absurd. You cannot possibly make such a decision based on the emotional outburst of a disgruntled employee. My decision is based on 8 months of careful investigation, Reynolds replied evenly. Your performance tonight merely confirmed our conclusions about your leadership style and ethical standards. He nodded toward the security guards who had moved closer to the stage during the exchange. Please escort Mr. Murphy out and ensure he surrenders his access credentials. Thomas looked wildly around the room, seeking allies, finding none. William Harrison remained seated, making no move to intervene on his VP's behalf. The security guards ascended the steps to the stage, flanking Thomas on either side. This is not over, Thomas snarled loud enough for the front tables to hear. You have made a serious mistake. As the guards led him toward the exit, the room erupted in hushed conversations. 300 people trying to process the corporate drama they had just witnessed, a public downfall, so unexpected it seemed almost scripted. Reynolds waited for the noise to subside before speaking again. I apologize for the disruption to what should have been a celebration. Please continue enjoying your evening. He turned to me, lowering his voice. Miss Lawson, would you join me for a moment? In a daze, I followed him to a quiet corner of the stage away from the microphone and the curious stares of the audience. William Harrison joined us, looking both shaken and calculating. That was quite a scene, Harrison said, his tone neutral. Reynolds fixed him with a pointed look. A scene that should never have been allowed to develop, William. We will discuss your oversight failures tomorrow. For now, I suggest you salvage what remains of your company gala. Harrison nodded stiffly, and returned to the ballroom floor, instructing the band to resume playing and encouraging guests to continue with the evening's festivities. Once we were relatively private, Reynolds addressed me directly. That took considerable courage, Miss Lawson. I could not let him destroy my reputation with lies. I replied, my voice still shaky but resolute. My team worked too hard on Falcon to see it misrepresented that way. Integrity under pressure is rare, Reynolds said, and valuable. For now, I suggest you return to the podium and give the presentation you prepared about Project Falcon. The actual facts, the actual accomplishments. Your team deserves that recognition. I stared at him in disbelief. You want me to continue as if nothing happened, after I was just publicly fired? You were not fired by anyone with the authority to make that decision, Reynolds replied with the ghost of a smile. Consider Mr. Murphy's statement nullified. We can discuss your future with the company tomorrow. For now, your colleagues deserve to hear the truth about Project Falcon from the person who actually led it to success. As Reynolds walked back to his table, I stood alone on the stage, trying to process the whirlwind of events. 10 minutes ago, my career had seemed destroyed, my professional reputation in tatters. Now the man who had attempted to destroy me was being escorted from the building, and the CEO of our parent company had all but endorsed me in front of the entire organization. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress with trembling hands, and walked back to the podium. 300 faces turned toward me, expressions ranging from shocked to fascinated to supportive. I caught Sarah's eye again, and she gave me an encouraging nod. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice growing stronger with each word. I would like to tell you the real story of Project Falcon and the extraordinary team that made it possible. I spoke for 15 minutes about Project Falcon, highlighting the technical innovations, the collaborative problem-solving, and most importantly, the contributions of each team member. I mentioned Brian's breakthrough on the compatibility issue, Sarah's data architecture that improved processing speed, and Allison's quality assurance protocols that caught potential problems before they affected the proof day product. As I spoke, I could feel the mood in the room shifting. The awkward tension of witnessing corporate drama gave way to genuine interest in the project's achievements. By the time I concluded highlighting the positive client feedback and financial impact, the audience responded with enthusiastic applause. When I returned to my table, my team greeted me with expressions of disbelief and admiration. I cannot believe you stood up to Thomas like that, Brian whispered, shaking his head in amazement. I cannot believe Reynolds backed you up, Sarah added. Do you know how unprecedented that is? Parent company CEOs do not typically get involved in subsidiary personnel matters. I was still processing everything myself, my emotions swinging between residual shock, vindication, and anxiety about what would happen next. The remainder of the gala passed in a blur of colleagues stopping by our table to express support or simply to witness the aftermath of the evening's drama firsthand. As the event wound down, a staff member from Reynolds' team approached me. Miss Lawson, Mr. Reynolds would like a word before you leave. He is waiting in the hotel's executive lounge. Heart racing again, I followed her through the hotel's elegant corridors to a private lounge area where Edward Reynolds sat alone reviewing documents on a tablet. He gestured for me to take the seat across from him. That was an excellent presentation, he said, setting his tablet aside. Clear, comprehensive, and appropriately generous in acknowledging team contributions. Precisely what leadership should look like. Thank you, I replied, still feeling slightly surreal about the entire situation. I appreciate your intervention tonight. I am not sure what would have happened otherwise. Reynolds studied me thoughtfully. What would have happened is that a valuable leader would have been lost and a problematic one would have continued damaging the organization. Neither outcome is acceptable to me. He leaned forward slightly. Miss Lawson, I want to be transparent with you. Thomas Murphy has been on our radar for nearly a year. His leadership style became a concern when exit interviews began showing a pattern of talented people leaving specifically to escape working under him. I had heard rumors, I admitted, but I was focused on my own projects trying to build my career. Understandable, Reynolds nodded. What you may not know is that 3 months ago we installed monitoring protocols on executive communications at Innovate Tech as part of our investigation. We had substantial evidence of Thomas taking credit for others' work, undermining team members to superiors, and manipulating project outcomes to benefit himself. I processed this information, realizing the implications. So, when I mentioned the emails tonight, We already had them, Reynolds confirmed, along with many others. Thomas's behavior tonight was merely the final confirmation of what we already knew. But your response was unexpected and quite revealing. I did not plan it, I confessed. I just could not let him destroy my reputation and my team's work with lies. Precisely, Reynolds said with surprising warmth. You acted on principle at considerable personal risk. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. He handed me a folder from the table. This contains the formal retraction of Thomas's statement regarding your employment. You are not only still employed, but effective Monday will be appointed Acting Vice President of Product Development, while we conduct a proper search for Thomas's replacement. I nearly dropped the folder in shock. Acting VP. But there are several directors with more seniority. Seniority is not leadership, Reynolds cut in. We have been evaluating all potential internal candidates for months. Your handling of Project Falcon already had you on our shortlist. Your actions tonight demonstrated exactly the kind of ethical leadership Meridian values. He continued before I could respond. The appointment is temporary officially, 6 months during which you will have the opportunity to demonstrate your capabilities at the executive level. I suspect you will do quite well. My mind raced with the implications. Acting VP was a massive promotion, bypassing several levels in the typical corporate ladder. The opportunity was extraordinary, but so were the challenges. I would be taking over a division previously led by someone who had actively tried to undermine me, inheriting his allies and enemies alike. This is unexpected, I managed. Reynolds smiled slightly. The best opportunities often are. I should mention that Thomas has been systematically marginalizing female leaders in his division for years. Your promotion sends an important message about our commitment to meritocracy. He checked his watch. I have another commitment, but William Harrison will meet with you Monday morning to formalize the transition. Until then, I suggest you take the weekend to prepare. The coming weeks will be challenging. As I stood to leave, still dazed by this turn of events, Reynolds added, One more thing, Miss Lawson. Thomas has powerful friends in the industry. He will not take this public humiliation lightly. Be prepared for resistance both internally and externally. I understand, I replied, straightening my shoulders. Thank you for the opportunity. I will not let you down. I know you will not, he said with quiet confidence. That is precisely why you are the right choice. As I left the hotel that night, my mind was spinning with everything that had transpired. In the span of a few hours, I had gone from anticipated recognition to public humiliation to an unprecedented promotion. The emotional whiplash was intense, but underneath the shock was a growing determination. Thomas had tried to destroy me professionally, and instead he had inadvertently catapulted me into his former position. My phone buzzed with messages from my team wanting to know what had happened after I was summoned to meet with Reynolds. I texted Sarah briefly. We need to talk. Breakfast tomorrow. You will not believe what just happened. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I realized that tonight had not just changed my career trajectory, it had fundamentally altered how I viewed corporate power dynamics and my own capacity to stand up against injustice. I had always considered myself a team player, someone who worked within the system. Tonight I had challenged that system when it proved corrupt, and instead of destroying me, it had elevated me. The real work I knew would begin on Monday. Taking over Thomas's division would be the greatest challenge of my career. But for tonight, I allowed myself to feel the sweet satisfaction of justice served in the most unexpected way possible. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety churning in my stomach. The weekend had passed in a blur of preparation, endless phone calls with Sarah strategizing the transition, and fielding curious messages from colleagues who had witnessed Friday's dramatic events. I arrived at the office an hour early, determined to project confidence despite my nerves. The security guard did a double take as I requested access to the executive floor, a place I had only visited for scheduled meetings in the past. You are on the updated access list, Miss Lawson, he confirmed after checking his system. Congratulations on the promotion. News traveled fast in corporate America. William Harrison was waiting in his office, looking considerably more composed than he had during the gala. Jessica, please come in. We have much to discuss. The next hour was a crash course in executive politics. Harrison, clearly aware that his own position was potentially precarious after Reynolds' intervention, was meticulously respectful while outlining my new responsibilities. The official announcement will go out at 9 a.m., he explained, sliding a document across his desk. This details your compensation package, which includes a 40% salary increase, expanded stock options, and the standard executive benefits. I scanned the numbers, momentarily dizzy at the financial leap this represented. My mortgage suddenly seemed much less daunting. There will be resistance. Harrison continued, his tone measured. Thomas cultivated strong loyalty among certain senior managers. Others may resent your rapid advancement. Navigating these relationships will be your first challenge. I understand, I replied, maintaining a calm exterior despite my racing thoughts. I plan to meet individually with each department head this week to establish open communication. Harrison nodded approvingly. Good approach. Reynolds was quite insistent on your appointment, which carries significant weight, but ultimately you will need to earn the team's respect through your leadership. As I left Harrison's office with my new executive access badge, the weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. This was not just a personal victory, but an opportunity to reshape a division that had clearly suffered under Thomas's leadership. By 9:30 a.m., my email was flooded with congratulatory messages alongside meeting requests from colleagues, suddenly eager to connect with the new VP. Sarah stopped by my temporary office, her expression a mixture of pride and amazement. Your new office is being prepared, she explained. Thomas's personal items have been packed up and removed over the weekend. That must have been awkward, I commented, imagining security supervising the disgraced executive collecting his belongings. He was not permitted back in the building, Sarah replied with barely concealed satisfaction. Security packed his things. Standard protocol for terminated executives, apparently. My first week as acting VP was a whirlwind of meetings, briefings, and discoveries about the division I had inherited. Thomas's management style had left deep wounds in the organizational culture. Several promising projects had been deprioritized for unclear reasons, talented team members marginalized, and resources allocated based on personal relationships rather than business value. He killed Project Hummingbird, completely explained Diane Foster, a senior developer who had previously kept her distance from me. It would have revolutionized our mobile interface, but Thomas thought mobile was just a trend that would fade. Show me the specs, I requested, immediately recognizing the potential. By the end of the week, Project Hummingbird had been resurrected with Diane leading the initiative. Not everyone welcomed the change in leadership. Marcus Jenkins, Thomas's longtime ally and director of strategy, made his resentment clear in our first one-on-one meeting. With all due respect, he said, his tone indicating precisely the opposite, some of us have concerns about such an inexperienced appointment to this critical role. Thomas had 20 years of industry experience. Your concerns are noted, I replied evenly. I welcome your industry insights as we move forward. My focus will be on creating an environment where good ideas are recognized regardless of their source. I hope you will be part of that vision. Marcus left unconvinced, and I knew he would be a continued source of resistance. But for every Marcus, there seemed to be 2 or 3 team members who cautiously welcomed the change, particularly among the mid-level managers who had borne the brunt of Thomas's credit-stealing behavior. 1 month into my new role, Edward Reynolds requested a progress update. I prepared a comprehensive assessment of the division, highlighting both the challenges and the opportunities I had identified. Impressive analysis, Reynolds commented after reviewing my report, particularly your identification of the siloed information flows Thomas had established. Classic control tactic. It has been eye-opening, I admitted. Several innovative projects were deliberately sidelined, apparently, because they originated from team members Thomas viewed as threats. Reynolds nodded knowingly. Thomas was particularly threatened by competent women in leadership positions. Did you know that before you joined Innovate Tech, the product development division had near gender parity at the manager level? Within 2 years of his appointment as VP, that ratio shifted to 70% male. I had noticed the imbalance, but did not realize it was so recent. I replied, making a mental note to review the division's hiring and promotion practices. One of the reasons I was so interested in your handling of Project Falcon, Reynolds continued, was that you succeeded despite being precisely the type of leader Thomas typically undermined. Your team's gender-balanced composition was also noteworthy. I hire and promote based on talent and fit, not demographics, I said, but I do believe diverse teams produce better results. Agreed, Reynolds replied. Which brings me to another matter. Thomas has been contacting board members attempting to paint his termination as a hasty overreaction. He is also spreading rumors about your qualifications. My stomach tightened. Should I be concerned? Not at all, Reynolds assured me. The board has been fully briefed on our investigation findings. However, I wanted you to be aware that he is attempting to undermine you externally, as well as through his remaining allies within the company. 3 months into my appointment, the changes in the product development division were becoming noticeable throughout the organization. We had launched Project Hummingbird to enthusiastic client response, reorganized team structures to break down the information silos, and implemented a collaborative project evaluation process that prevented any single executive from unilaterally killing promising initiatives. Marcus Jenkins eventually requested a transfer to another division, unable to adapt to the new leadership approach. I approved it without hesitation, recognizing that some cultural remnants of Thomas's regime would need to move on. In his place, I promoted Heather Johnson, whose mentorship had been so valuable to my own career. Are you sure? She asked when I offered her the Director of Strategy role. Some might see it as favoritism. I am promoting you because you are the most qualified candidate, I replied firmly. Your strategic vision and collaborative approach are exactly what this division needs. The fact that you supported me before my promotion is irrelevant to your qualifications. 6 months after that fateful gala, Edward Reynolds called me to his office for what I assumed would be a standard review of my interim appointment. Instead, I found both Reynolds and William Harrison waiting along with the Chief Human Resources Officer. Jessica Reynolds began. Your 6-month interim appointment is coming to a close. I nodded, maintaining a professional demeanor, despite the sudden flutter of anxiety. Had I misread my success in the role? Were they bringing in an external candidate after all? The board has reviewed your performance extensively, Reynolds continued. The product development division has shown remarkable improvement under your leadership. Project Hummingbird exceeded revenue projections by 30%. Employee satisfaction scores have increased by 22 points. And perhaps most tellingly, cross-functional collaboration has improved across all metrics. He exchanged glances with Harrison before continuing. We would like to offer you the position permanently with an additional adjustment to your compensation package, reflecting your demonstrated value to the organization. Relief and pride washed over me. As I accepted the offer, the last lingering shadow of Thomas Murphy's attempt to destroy my career finally lifted. As we concluded the meeting, Reynolds mentioned one final detail. You might be interested to know that Thomas has taken a position with Rival Tech, significantly below his previous level from what I understand. His reputation in the industry has suffered considerably. I did not take pleasure in Thomas's downfall, but there was a certain poetic justice in knowing that his attempt to publicly humiliate me had ultimately resulted in his own professional demotion. That evening, I invited my core team for dinner to celebrate the permanent appointment. Sarah, Brian, Allison, and Heather joined me at an upscale restaurant, all of them having advanced in their own careers during the transformative 6 months. I want to thank all of you, I said once we were seated. Your support through this entire journey has been invaluable. We have proven that integrity and collaboration ultimately triumph over politics and self-interest. Sarah raised her glass in a toast. To Jessica, who taught us all that standing up for what is right can sometimes change everything. As we celebrated late into the evening, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me here. From the verge of public professional humiliation to leading a revitalized division with record results. The path had not been easy, but it had revealed strengths I did not know I possessed and values I would never again compromise. 1 year to the day after that life-changing gala, I stood at the podium in the same ballroom at the Grand Wellington Hotel. This time I was not fighting for my professional life, but hosting the event as the permanently appointed Executive Vice President of Product Development. Looking out at the gathered employees, I could trace the company's transformation in their expressions. Where there had once been tension and political wariness, I now saw engagement and genuine camaraderie. The culture shift had not happened overnight, but through consistent leadership, focused on merit, collaboration, and integrity. Yet my own journey had been more complex than the professional success visible to others. In the weeks following Thomas's dramatic exit and my unexpected promotion, I had struggled with anxiety and imposter syndrome, despite my outward confidence. I keep waiting for someone to expose me as a fraud. I confessed to Sarah, during a rare, vulnerable moment, about 2 months into my new role. What if I cannot actually handle this level of responsibility? That is the imposter syndrome talking, she replied wisely. Look at what you have already accomplished. The division is thriving under your leadership precisely because you are not Thomas. You lead with integrity and recognize others' contributions. Still, I found myself working 14-hour days, double-checking every decision, and lying awake at night replaying conversations and second-guessing myself. The public nature of my promotion had placed me under intense scrutiny, and I felt the weight of representing women in leadership with every action I took. 3 months in, I finally took Heather's advice and started working with an executive coach, Dr. Lillian Parker specialized in helping leaders navigate transitions, particularly women facing the unique challenges of executive roles. Your reaction is completely normal, she assured me in our first session. You experienced a profound professional trauma, followed by an equally dramatic elevation. Either event alone would trigger adjustment issues. Together, they created a perfect storm of conflicting emotions. Through our weekly sessions, I began to process the experience more healthily. I learned to recognize when I was overcompensating due to anxiety rather than genuine business needs. I developed strategies for maintaining boundaries and practicing self-care, even while carrying executive responsibilities. Leadership is a marathon, not a sprint, Doctor. Parker reminded me often. Burning yourself out serves no one, least of all the team counting on your guidance. Gradually, the nightmares about public humiliation faded. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach loosened. I began to trust my instincts again to lead with confidence rather than fear of failure. 6 months into my role, I implemented 2 initiatives that reflected my personal growth as much as my professional vision. The first was a comprehensive mentorship program, specifically designed to support promising women and minorities in their career development at Innovate Tech. The Thomas Murphy approach to leadership almost pushed me out of this industry, I explained to Edward Reynolds when presenting the program for approval. How many talented individuals have we lost because they lacked support when facing similar obstacles? This program creates the network I wish I had had earlier in my career. Reynolds approved the initiative immediately, and within 3 months, 40 mentor pairings were actively working together across the company. The program's success led to its adoption across all Meridian Group subsidiaries the following year. The second initiative was more directly personal. I reached out to 3 former employees who had left the company during Thomas's tenure after being marginalized despite strong performance. Nancy Wilson had been a rising star in product design before Thomas repeatedly passed her over for promotion. James Howard had created an innovative customer feedback system that Thomas had killed without explanation. And Kelly Thompson had left after Thomas publicly criticized her project management despite objectively excellent results. I cannot promise to undo the damage that was done, I told each of them during individual conversations. But Innovate Tech is a different company now, and we would be honored to have your talents back if you are open to considering it. To my surprise and delight, all 3 eventually returned to the company, in roles that properly valued their contributions. Their reintegration sent a powerful message throughout the organization about the new cultural direction. As the 1-year mark of my promotion approached, I finally felt I had fully stepped into my role, not just professionally, but emotionally. The company Gala, once the site of my greatest professional trauma, became an opportunity for reflection and celebration. This past year has taught me that leadership is not about titles or control, I told the assembled employees during my address. True leadership is about creating an environment where everyone can contribute their best work and receive appropriate recognition for their efforts. I paused, looking out at the faces of people who had been on this journey with me. Sarah now, Director of Data Architecture, Brian leading our Innovation Lab, Heather thriving as Director of Strategy, and dozens of others whose careers had blossomed in the new merit-based culture we had built together. 1 year ago in this very room, I learned that standing up for yourself can be terrifying but necessary. I also learned that integrity, even when it seems costly in the moment, ultimately prevails. The applause that followed felt like healing, a final closure on the dramatic events that had changed so many of our lives. Later that evening, Edward Reynolds found me during the reception. Remarkable transformation, he commented, surveying the room. Not just in business metrics, though those are impressive, but in the fundamental culture. People want to work here now. Thank you for taking a chance on me, I replied sincerely. That night could have gone very differently without your intervention. Reynolds shook his head slightly. I merely created the opportunity. You did the difficult work of transformation, both personal and organizational. That is much harder than making a single decisive moment. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing near the stage where everything had changed a year ago. The memory of that moment of standing up to Thomas, despite overwhelming fear, no longer brought anxiety, but a sense of quiet strength. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had walked off that stage in shame. How many others might have continued suffering in silence under toxic leadership? How many innovative ideas would have been suppressed? How many careers derailed? Sometimes, the hardest moment of your life becomes the doorway to your greatest purpose. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where standing up for yourself seemed impossible but necessary? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about navigating workplace challenges with integrity. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, sometimes the path to justice requires courage in the most unexpected moments.